Okay, hello, this is Chris Park from Arkin Games. This video is primarily for Dune, but also for anybody else who's doing any management of our bug tracker, which is known as Mantis. So you can click Idea Tracker on the Arkin Games website or just go to bugtracker.arkingames.com. Thanks again to Quinn for setting that up. Once you're in there, you generally have to log in, and then you can see a screen that looks somewhat like this. Whether you're a reporter, which is somebody who's giving bugs, or whether you're a manager or developer or administrator, somebody who's dealing with them, you're going to see something along these lines. You can select which project it is that you are viewing bugs from or issues from, or view them from everything. Once you've so you do that up in that corner. Once you've done that, this my view is pretty useless, honestly. I mean, I guess the timeline can be kind of useful, but for the most part, any sort of changes that are coming in, anytime somebody adds a bug, updates a bug, adds a comment to a bug that you have been involved with in some way, it should email you. If you haven't been involved with the bug, then it will just tell you when it's been added, and then it's not going to tell you anything about it from then onwards. View issues is really the meat of it, and you can set up your own custom filters using all this stuff up here. We have some ones that are kind of our default ones, and so I believe it's developer to do items. Developer to do items by date is actually the best one right now, and so this basically just shows stuff that is not basically that's on the radar for now. If you go to the blank one or reset filter, it'll show everything. And this shows things that are closed, things that are resolved, and every other possible status. There are, trying to find some here. Okay, so we've got a variety of different categories that don't show up in the developer to-do list, and that includes the considering and strongly considering statuses as well. If I go to report issue as a, if I go as anybody, I can come in here and choose from one of the general types of bugs or suggestions or whatever. There's also ones that are not labeled as all projects, which might be specific for a given project. So, for the release Raptor game, we might have like Raptor animations or something as a category, but that wouldn't be a general across all of our projects category. The severity, honestly, we ignore that. We don't use that whatsoever. Product version, we use that heavily. That's very important, so we know when that comes in, what it's related to. Assigned to is something that is not available for reporters. It's only for developers, administrators, and managers for us to say, all right, who's responsible for this? Whether we're going to do anything about it or not for now, who's responsible? We have a general summary, then larger description, and then people can upload one or more files. Now, once they've uploaded some files, then we can click in. You have to click the little ID, the number in the ID column. You can click on in, and once you edit it, then you'll see different things. You've got add note, which will add stuff down there. And then you've got some other things up here that you can change, like the status, who it's assigned to, what the resolution is, what was the product version it was originally in, was the product version it was fixed in, that sort of thing. and you can adjust the category and all that. Almost never will you want to actually hit edit unless you're actually wanting to adjust the description or what version it was reported as occurring in, um, or if you're wanting to adjust, I guess, the category. But honestly, the category doesn't matter that much either because we rarely sort by that. I mean, it's useful to have, but the meat of the stuff is in the summary. If somebody gives a really bad summary, that'd be another reason to edit it and like retype the summary as something else. Generally speaking, we do change status and assign to in order to adjust the status, the resolution, and the assign to. And then for any sort of, it said add note, I believe it was, yeah, add note. For any sort of add note items, there's a way to do that right on down here, and you can also add files, and it's cleaner to just go ahead and add it through the bottom because then you don't see it as being edited. Editing the main top thing, you just see a note added, and you can see the full history of what all has happened with each thing here. X4000 bug hunters, me, Badger's Badger, Keith is Keith, and there's not a lot of confusion there. So I'm going to go back to the developer to do items by date. This is by date they were last updated, which is pretty handy. Over here, you can see how many notes have been added to it, which can also be an indication of something that needs doing with. And if you want to do a further filtering of something, like saying, I just want to filter for new, for instance, you can do what I just did there and hit apply. And then now I've got just the new items. And so it will stay on this filtering until I change to something else. If you want to use this frequently, then we could save this current filter as, and I can make it public. In my case, all projects, new items by date. So save current filter. So now we've got new items by date. Everybody has that since I made it public. And we've also got new and feedback. And then we've got developer to do items by date. So going back to developer, actually, I'm going to go to new and feedback. I'm going to go to developer to do items by date, and I'm going to go to the end of the list, so the oldest stuff, and let's see what's going on here. So over here, you can see who reported it. This can be pretty useful. If it's something that was reported by somebody who's internal, then that is often a to-do item, for ourselves. If it's reported by somebody who makes lots of bug reports, then that's something that we definitely want to look carefully at. If it's somebody new who has a crash, that's also usually a good indicator that we want to take a pretty close look at it. But if it's like, sometimes it's somebody unknown and they're spamming a bunch of suggestions in, and that could be good or bad. We just have to figure out the quality of their suggestions as they as we get to know them. So so we've got some old stuff here. I put a thing, ability to set the controls via the input mappings.dat file for Keith. I think that's not really relevant. This one is a different one. Easier XML access to controls and settings files. This was something I was thinking about last March. It's gotten stale. It's really not an issue anymore. So I'd put this in and assigned it to Keith. And now I went in, changed status to closed. In this particular case, it's not fixed per se. It's just not something we're going to do. And so in this particular case, no change required because it's kind of become irrelevant. Won't fix is basically working as intended. Suspended, we don't really use. Duplicate, we use when there's a literal duplicate. There's a way to link the duplicates, and then we mark one of them as duplicate and closed, and then we still have both reports in there, however, which is nice. Unable to reproduce would be something where typically we would ask for feedback first. If they were unable to give us feedback, where we were then able to reproduce it, then we'd close it with, I don't know, unable to reproduce, and that's pretty rare. Not fixable is, something that's just like engine level or whatever. It's not within the scope of something we can fix, period. Reopened happens when somebody disputes a fix that we say is fixed or closed or whatever. They can reopen it, because a lot of times we'll mark it as fixed, but we haven't actually fully tested it, and that's fine. And when we've tested it in the scope of where we made the fix, but we haven't done like full integration testing. And so somebody else might go, nope, it's still happening under XYZ circumstances, or still happens on my machine or whatever. And so it's nice because they can reopen it. We can then respond to it and then flag it and so on. The ones that are flagged as open are ones that haven't had any sort of resolution yet. They are just either under discussion or on hold or haven't been gotten to yet or whatever. So that's the resolutions and what those are, how we're using these. In this particular case, so I'm saying this was assigned to Keith, no change required, and I can add a note if I want to. In this case, I don't really care to add a note. Keith will easily know why there was no change required, and it doesn't really matter to anybody else, I don't think. And so you can see the last update. Now bump this way up the list. There's a handy little recently visited thing up here, which gives your bug numbers. You can do # and then a bug number in order to give a link to a bug. So you can do like # that in order to create a little link over to, in this case, the same bug. You can also say this is related to something else, just to say, hey, these things are related. They're not the same issue, but they're in the same cluster of issues, because Keith or I or whoever would likely go in and fix that cluster of issues all at one time, and then just bam, 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 mark all those things as fixed. If they're not actually related in the sense of we're going to fix, like, 7 in one blow, we do one fix and it fixes all those things at one time, then they're probably not related in the sense of these relationships. If they're a duplicate, then you set either duplicate of or has duplicate, and you put in the other number, and then when you add that, go ahead and add it, why not? Then it has this duplicate of this, and you can click over and see this one. Now it says has duplicate that, and you can actually delete that relationship. And so now I've made some useless log entries, but aside from that, nothing was harmed just now. And sometimes it's nice to leave the duplicate issues open, but just have them flagged as duplicates. But I really don't tend to care with that, as long as they're related and noted as being duplicates. So yeah, so this settings issue, this was fixed a long time ago. I don't know in what version, but I mark it as resolved. This was something that Keith fixed. I have no idea what the version was, so I can't set that, but I will leave resolution as fixed. Basic turretry builds tachyon array. This is old, and I'm not sure if this is still relevant. And so I'm going to put in here, these issues are from Badger way back, well before he was helping out with anything. And there's a bunch of other stuff in here that is likely already fixed. This stuff is very stale. So it's pretty hard to categorize those because almost all of those are fixed. Even these ones from December, a lot of these were fixed at some point in the past. So I seem to recall there was a health, yep, version 0.7 Guardian's Missing Health Bar. Sometimes Keith or I will run across something like this ourselves, wind up fixing it, and not think to actually not remember that there was an issue that we need to go back in there and fix. Give Keith the credit for that. Not that we particularly keep track, but that way, if we're wondering what's going on and why is there something weird, then we can do that. Random AI type. And I'll assign this to Badger. At the time, he didn't have the ability to do that, but now it's the sort of thing that he could easily handle at some point. Yeah, so right now, most of this stuff is fairly stale, and you'll notice almost all of this is from Badger. We're going to be heading into a period very soon where we're going to be having a lot of people giving a whole bunch of different kinds of feedback, and we're going to start wanting to categorize that stuff. And anything that was updated in the last day or something like that shows up with a bolded updated time, so it's easier to keep track of conversations there. There are some legitimate issues here where I'm pretty sure that this is actually an issue. One way or another, I need Keith to check this out. Keith has obviously closed a duplicate a while ago, but that was probably on an older version, 19.343, 19.327. Okay, so Badger closed it, noting this was originally Badger's report. He closed his original one, saying that Miklashev, I think that's how you say it, has actually put in a repro case. He may have a file, I'm not sure. At any rate, so I'm going to go ahead and assign that to Keith. Keith will get an email saying that that's been assigned to him. However, this does not put any sort of priority on it for Keith, and doing like a severity or anything like that wouldn't help. So what we're essentially going to want to do coming up before too long is when the feedback really starts getting heavy, we're going to need to start maintaining a document where we keep track of stuff in our own kind of priority view. We've used Trello in the past for that sort of thing. It can be handy. It's a little squirrely in some ways. We could potentially just use a Google Drive document, as janky as that is. It's very compact, which is nice. We'll see. So, but anyway, this is how to use Mantis. That's pretty much everything in terms of actually using it. The changing of status. I didn't talk about that. So if there's something that is that's nice for someday, but that is absolutely clearly out of scope for any time prior to 1.0, then we put that under considering. People come up with great ideas all the time, and a lot of them, there have been times where we've come back and used an idea from somebody that they submitted, and then 4 years later we came back and used it in some expansion. And so we're not just shining them on when we say we're considering it. We actually are. If we're not going to consider it, then we would say that we're going to close it because some sort of reason, this really doesn't fit with the ethos of the game, or if you want to do that, you can mod it, or blah, 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 blah. If we are actually, that is theoretically something we would want to do at some point in the future, but we have no plans on any sort of timeline to do it, and we're not making any sort of promises, it goes to considering. And that is basically limbo. We have a strongly considering category, which is, once we have 1.0 done and the whole critical path is done, and we maybe have some spare time where we are in kind of a maintenance period, and this is something that we particularly would like to look at. That this is like a particularly interesting thing. Feedback is asking for feedback from the reporter saying, can you give me a save game? Can you give me an actual error report? Can you give me whatever it is? Are there steps to repro this? Whatever it is. Requires feedback. I don't know why that's separate. I think that got added when we upgraded our version of Mantis. Feature for later is another way of saying considering, more or less. Minor fix for later. We don't really, if it's a legitimate bug, but the bug can wait until after 1.0, then I would say minor fix for later. I don't think we need to use feature for later at the moment. Acknowledged, I usually use if I don't know who to assign it to yet, and I know it needs to be looked at. I'm not sure if the thing is legit or if I need more information or what. I want to say, yes, we got your thing, so it just doesn't hang out in news status like a bunch of these have. Yes, we got your thing. I have no idea what I'm going to do with it yet, but I have seen it and we'll get to it. Confirmed is saying either, yes, I've seen this too, or we've got multiple reports of this, or in some other fashion, we know for a fact this is definitely an issue in the bug sense, or it is a thing that we are going to definitely do in a suggestion sense. Like, it's confirmed, we're going to do that. Generally speaking, we don't use confirmed much because when we're hitting the state of confirmed, almost inevitably we're hitting the state of assigned, which is saying, okay, this goes in Keith's bucket, or this goes in Chris's bucket, or Badger's bucket, or whatever, based on whoever it is. And then resolved means it was actually fixed or implemented or whatever. And pretty much Keith, Badger, myself, whoever's actually doing the fixing will go in and put those. There are cases where we forget to do that on an issue that went stale. And so then latently we need to go in and do resolved, like you saw me do earlier in this video. For closed ones, those are ones where we're saying we're not actually going to do something, or we don't need to do something because either we don't agree, through the course of other stuff, yours has become a non-issue, or, whatever else, we kind of tangentially fixed it in some other way. If it's something that was kind of fixed as a byproduct of something else, then I'll usually mark it as resolved. If it's the sort of thing that it's like, joystick controls don't work well, it's like, oh yeah, we don't support joystick controls anymore, then I wouldn't mark that as resolved. I'd just mark it as closed because it's no longer relevant. We don't support joysticks, but just what popped into my head. So, okay, that is the full view of Mantis. So, alrighty, thanks for watching.